Thank you, Senator. Senator Welch, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. I mean, you're hearing the incredible frustration all of us have. You heard Senator Vance, Senator Tester, Senator Klobuchar. I mean, it's really driving our constituents crazy. Vermont, we had 3.5 million robocalls just last month. It's like 6 calls per Vermonter, and it's really unsettling, especially to older people. Who think they may be getting a call from a grandchild or a son or a daughter, and they have to pick it up and figure out what's going on. And I know you're trying to do stuff, but it's not working. It's not working the way it needs to. You know, I joined Senator Lujan and Senator Markey in asking the FCC to align its do not call registry guidelines with those of the FTC, as well as prohibit telemarketers from calling consumers without explicit consent. Ms. Saunders, do you believe these actions would benefit consumers? And what additional steps can Congress take to push the FCC and better protect consumers from robocalls?
Thank you for the question, Senator. We have been pushing the FCC for months now to simply reiterate that the language in its current regulations mean what it says. And instead, the FCC has proposed a regulation that would reduce protections from the current regulations. And we've been very afraid of this. So actually—
Why is that? Why are they doing that?
I'm not sure whether it's a misunderstanding or whether the lead generators and the sellers who are benefiting from these telemarketing calls have gotten to them, frankly. But the proposed regulation or anything like it is very dangerous. The FCC issued regulations 20 years ago explicitly requiring that every telemarketing call is only legal if it's pre-recorded if the consumer has provided a signed written consent allowing that caller to make calls to that consumer. And the proposed regulations would allow more calls per consent, would not require a writing. And so I can't tell you why they're issued, why they're proposed, but I can say that if you can encourage the FCC not to proceed in this way, it would be beneficial.
All right, let me move on to a question for Mr. Rudolph. It's about generative AI, and you know, there's some argument that that could help actually push back on the scammers, but it also obviously is a tool that is going to be used by scammers, especially generating a familiar voice. Can you tell me how the evolving landscape for generative AI impact the ongoing efforts to combat fraudulent communications and protect consumers?
First, I'd like to recognize your state as well. There's robocall platforms or robocall operations that refuse to call Vermont. That state's too hot to call. So your constituents benefit from your attorney general's work, attorneys general's work in that regard. On the topic of generative AI, clearly threat actors have flocked to it. It allows one person to do the work of hundreds. Generative AI doesn't have ethics or questions about what it's doing as it's affecting social engineering. On our side, on the good guy side, defending against what's going on in industry, a senator earlier showed a blank piece of paper as a robocall mitigation plan. Generative AI or a large language model can rip through the robocall mitigation database filings and actually synthesize and understand if they're sufficient or lacking sufficient controls. So that's a great place where we could apply that technology and probably discard half the entries in that database in an afternoon or a week of work.
All right, Ms. Saunders, again, thank you. The stir and shake, and I want to go through it, you know it, but how can the FCC incentivize providers to use the available tools to block calls?
I think the FCC has done a very good job at implementing stir shaken, and the problem with stir shaken is not the particular technology, It's the fact that there's this whole other method for robocallers to use borrowed numbers, rotating numbers for, as Mr. Rudolph explained, for a minute or for a particular call. And the ability of robocallers to use the numbering resources or misuse them in this way completely undermines the whole purpose of Stir Shaken. So I think now it's time for the FCC to drill down on the numbering resources misuse.
Thank you. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.